If you're new here, in the last two episodes, I bought a 2002 YZ250 for $1,200 that the owner claimed he bought a new clutch for and didn't have time to finish installing it properly. I found the clutch installed with multiple missing components, ended up getting the bike running, and learned that the bike actually had transmission problems.
Oh yeah, dude, we got problems.
I might have bought myself a lemon, but in today's video, we're going to get this thing back up and running. I hope you enjoy.
There were over 700 comments in the last YouTube video of you guys guessing how long it took to take the motor out of this frame. It took me so long scrolling through those to see if anyone got it right. Within like an hour of the video being posted, I saw someone got within 1 second of the correct answer, and I thought that would be the winner for sure. And then when I was scrolling through today to actually find out who won, somebody got it to the exact second. It took me 31 minutes and 37 seconds to get the motor out of this frame. And the winner of that KP long sleeve t-shirt is Colby Produce. So Colby, congratulations. I will respond to your comment. You can message me on Instagram or shoot me an email and I'll get you over a t-shirt in your size. Now, all of my merch stock is starting to run low, so thank you to each and every one of you who has purchased something. There might still be something for you over on the website. And once again, merch purchases do get you entered to win my KTM 200. There's about 3 weeks left until someone wins that bike. I hope to do another merch drop in the coming months, but until then, it would be really cool to sell out of the first drop, and we're getting close. So links to get some merch or enter directly to win the KTM 200 are in the description below. Without further ado, let's get going on this YZ250. My goal of getting this ready for the 32-1 Premix Classic in Helena did not happen. Took me a little longer than expected to get the parts I needed. I needed some transmission bearings, shift forks, a couple gears, as well as a full gasket and seal kit. I now have all of those in hand, so let's build an engine and get this thing running.
All right, guys, so there was a little bit of prep work for these cases before I could start the reassembly process. I removed all of the seals using my Tusk seal puller, and I'll go ahead and note right now that I have a page on my website linking all of the tools and new parts featured in this video if you're looking to build an engine yourself. It's not rocket science. Find a good service manual for your bike, follow it to a T, and it's just big kid Legos. Everyone thinks from these videos I've been doing this my whole life. I started wrenching on bikes about 5 years ago with zero prior knowledge and learned what I know exactly how you are. Watching YouTube videos, reading manuals, and just tackling projects one step at a time. While those cases were heating up, here is a comparison of the old and new first gear, and you can see how worn that old one was, along with a comparison of one of the shift forks. I installed the new first and fifth gears onto the transmission shaft, and then it was time to remove all of the old bearings. The reason I put the cases in the oven is to make the aluminum expand, as aluminum expands quicker than steel, allowing the bearings to come out easily. I baked them at 300 for about 30 minutes. Same concept for putting the bearings in the freezer, it causes that steel to contract. You can see just how easily those bearings come out after baking the cases, and there were 2 left that are blind and required my Tusk slide hammer. With all of the bearings out, I gave the cases a good scrub and a degreaser bath to get all of that nasty old dirt and grime off. They then went back into the oven in preparation for those new bearings. Cases prepped and ready to go. I've got a set of crank bearings and seals from All Balls and some transmission bearings from Hot Rods. Let's get to assembling. Hands where I can see them. There were a couple things I wanted to talk about during that engine build, but I didn't want to interrupt. I got lots of comments in the last video about how that clutch nut was sketchy with how chewed up it was, and that was a valid point. So I cleaned that thing up with prime wheels to get rid of all the burrs, and I also want to shout out Luke at Fathead Racing for the beautiful Fathead cylinder head. These heads not only look good, but transfer heat better than OEM and have interchangeable domes so you can switch between pump gas and race gas safely and reliably. I had to fix the threads where the stator mounts as they were a little chewed up, but from there, it was smooth sailing. I added oil, and this engine should be ready to not only run, but shift properly. Now, I wanted to clean up the chassis before putting this freshly rebuilt engine back into the frame, as it's got plenty of 20-year-old dirt caked up on it. But it was raining outside, so while I awaited sunshine, I shifted attention to give this front brake the attention it needs. If you recall, I bought this bike with no front caliper installed at all, and upon inspection, the caliper given to me in a box was damaged, as were the pistons. It ended up being cheaper to buy a complete used caliper on eBay than it was to buy new pistons, so that is the route I went. Of course, the eBay caliper was nasty and needed a rebuild too, so let's tackle it. With the caliper just about ready to go back on the bike, I realized I was missing this small metal clip that aligns the brake pads, but thankfully, my local YZ dealer had one in stock. I installed that clip along with a new set of pads, and then it was time to install the caliper onto the left fork. The brake line routing on these old YZs is pretty goofy, but with that installed, the brake just needs a bleed. I then removed this Electron carb, and funny enough, I couldn't find an Allen that would work for these heads. I tried metric, standard, and Torx bits and ended up removing them with a set of pliers. I got a brief weather window that allowed me to wash and scrub down the bike before installing the engine. Of course, it started raining again, and poor Mac was scratching at the door to get into the garage.
Come here, buddy. Come here, it's okay. Mackers is afraid of the rain. It's okay, you can help me with the YZ250. Come on, come on, Mr. Good Boy. You get me all hairy, dude. We're trying to film here. The rain's not gonna kill you, mister.
I removed the rear wheel in order to make realigning the swing arm an easier task with the engine installed, and this bike is in desperate need of new rear brake pads anyway. The rear axle was certainly crusty and required some force to remove, but wasn't totally seized and did come out without an issue. Lots of times when installing engines, I leave the Kickstarter and shift lever off to free up some space, as they always seem to get in the way. And initially I tried installing this engine with the shifter in place, but ended up removing it as I was struggling to find the clearance and kept getting caught on things. Major milestone with the engine back in the frame. Let's get this thing torqued and keep plucking away. With the engine back in the frame, it was time to get a carburetor back on the bike. If you've been here for the last 2 episodes, you know this bike came with Electron carb. While I have limited experience with Electrons and nothing bad to say about them, I've worked with Smart Carb on my CR250 build and my KTM 200 build, and I was super impressed with the carb on both projects. One interesting thing to note about the Lectron versus the Smart Carb is I measured the carb bore at the intake, and while both carbs claim 38 millimeters, the Lectron was actually 34, and I measured 37 on the Smart Carb, although it does have a Venturi shape that elongates that opening vertically. This means solid bottom end can be expected from both carbs, while that smaller bore on the Lectron might impact top end pull. A couple things I love about the Smart Carb are the toolless adjustment as well as the internal float bowl venting, which means the carb spills zero fuel whatsoever, unlike the Lectron or a traditional carb. This Smart Carb also has a plug-in for the TPS sensor, which is a really cool design that utilizes a magnet inside the carb body to relay throttle position to the ECU. The air boot does require a slight modification for optimal Smart Carb performance, and while it was really tough to get a shot inside the YZ air boot, you can see that opening in the carb is slightly obstructed by the lip of the boot. A quick minute with the rotary tool to shave that down, and this carb will be breathing free. Along with this new carb came a brand new throttle cable, and I wanted to switch out the grips for some new ones as well. Would you take a look at the surprise I found inside this throttle assembly?
You gotta be kidding me. This is the spring retainer that is supposed to go in the carburetor.
You literally just can't make this stuff up, man. Actually ridiculous, but lucky for me, I had one on hand from who knows what. Don't have to order anything, we can get this throttle done. I wonder how many I don't even have words right now. Those nasty old brake pads were about 0.5 millimeter away from destroying the brake rotor, but luckily it was still in usable shape. With new brake pads installed, it was time to slap a Shinko 525 rear tire on this wheel since the old rear was pretty well worn. Luckily, the previous owner had a good choice in front tire with a Shinko 216 MX that has plenty of tread left. I reinstalled the rear wheel along with the drive chain, frame guards, and radiators. I realize how crunched this right radiator is. Despite not leaking, it would be wise to replace it and make aligning plastics easier. I've got some new radiators on the way, but for now, this will have to do. The bike received fresh coolant, and then I oiled up a new Tusk air filter with some no-toil filter oil. That went into the airbox, and then when I went to install the fuel tank, I learned that the frame threads were completely stripped out on one side. I used a nutsert tool to install a threaded insert that would serve as one of the two mounting points for the fuel tank. With the fuel tank installed, I added an inline fuel filter to the fuel line as Smart Carb recommends, and at this point, this bike was damn near ready to start again with one key piece missing, the exhaust pipe. While this header might look nasty, it is actually in really great shape with just one notable dent and neglect that allowed it to rust. I knew that Prime MX wheels would make pretty quick work of bringing this pipe back to life, but step one was removing the dent. I plugged both ends and filled the pipe to about 35 psi of air, and watch as this dent magically expands out of this pipe. Now my goal with this pipe was to make it look nice again without spending a whole day on it, because you can easily spend 6 to 9 hours on one of these if you're shooting for perfection, but I spent 30 minutes with the bench buffer and then about 20 with the rotary tool, and got this pipe to a really incredible condition. I then blued the weld with a propane torch to add a little extra flair to this thing, and it was time to put it back on the bike. I didn't restore it to perfection, but it looks damn good for about an hour's worth of effort. I learned most of what I did to this pipe from Cameron Niemela, who is the owner of Prime, so if you want some of these cleaning wheels for yourself, I've got a link down below, and you are supporting an awesome American-owned company. I popped the silencer back on as well, and it was time to fire this bike up.
I'm about to pull it off of this stand, and I have had this thing for like 5 years now. Redline Stand sent me this a long time ago, and it has worked phenomenally well for every single bike I've done. It goes up about 3 feet. You can roll the bike all over the shop. They're super convenient for when bikes are torn partially down. I gave them one shout out in a video like 4 years ago, so I figured they deserve a little recognition for how much I've used this thing. I'll put them in the description.
I mixed some 91 octane, ethanol-free premium fuel at a ratio of 40-to-1 with Yamalube, added fuel to the tank, and was finally ready to see if this bike runs.
What does this caution tag say? Avoid potential flooding. Leave the choke up or in the open position during initial fueling. After successful initial fueling, push the choke plunger down to the closed position. Do you remember when I didn't do that on the CR250? So I am not going to make that mistake this time. Choke is in the on position.
I temporarily installed the old plastics back on the bike, and there was one thing left to do before spinning this thing around the block. Install this brand new skid plate from SX Slide Plate. These plates offer incredible protection, slide over obstacles easily, cover your linkage, and are made in the USA.
All right, now for the moment of truth. Let's see if she shifts. That's not good. False alarm there. Fuel was off. Here we go. Let's see if she shifts. We're in first gear. Feather that clutch on out. Ah, that's how a transmission's supposed to feel. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. We got a rippin' running YZ250, baby. Dude, I forgot how freaking powerful YZs are. Dude, let's go. We freaking fixed it.
So the $1,200 YZ250 is back up and running, and more importantly, shifting. This thing appears to be running strong. It starts first kick and it rips. Obviously, I was pretty easy on it because it's still breaking in these new engine components, but I got the front wheel off the ground a couple times and this thing has plenty of power. So despite all that work, she is still pretty ugly with these scratched up old plastics. So in the next episode, I'll be getting some plastics, graphics, and a seat cover from Decal Works installed. So I know if you look real closely, she's still a little rough around the edges, but fully rebuilt engine, full Hinson clutch, smart carb, fathead racing cylinder head, fresh oil change, clean air boot with a new no-toil air filter, new throttle cable, new grips, new rear tire. For a $1,200 2002 YZ250, this thing's gonna be pretty fresh. I got a ton done on this bike in this video. I apologize for the wait since episode 2, but obviously there was a lot of work to be done. I gotta remind you one more time that you can get entered to win my KTM 200 along with a riding trip out to Montana to come rip some single track with me on your new bike. Links for that, as well as other links mentioned, are down in the description below. Click that like button if you enjoyed, leave me a comment, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.